Shalom. All praise to Yahweh, Bashem Hamashiach, Yahweh Shai. I'm your brother Parazah, elder and judge. If you have any legal issues, any problems, marriage, divorce, property, inheritance, theft, anything that pertains to the Torah or the law, send me an inbox, give me a message, and I'll be happy to help adjudicate your calls. Any direction or guidance that you need from the scriptures about the history to fulfill the law from Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 8. I'll be more than glad to help you with that also as an elder in Yashar Allah, of Yashar Allah. Right now I want to go into some information about the new moon. Okay. Dive right into it. All praise to Yahweh, Bashem Hamashiach, Yahweh Shai. We thank the Most High that He's been able to give us through His Son Yahweh Shai and through the Holy Spirit a better understanding of His Word, better understanding of the commandments and the laws that were given to our prophet Masha, Moses. Thank Him for sending His Son Yahweh Shai to be the sacrifice, the atonement for our sins. Okay. So what we want to do right about now is I want to go to Genesis chapter 1. Okay. And I want to read verse 1. In the beginning, Elohim created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was void, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the spirit of Elohim moved upon the face of the waters. And Elohim said, "Let there be light," and there was light. So the Most High was dwelling since eternity in that darkness, right? And the earth was without form, but all of the elements were there that were needed to create the earth from eternity. So matter exists. As you know, matter can neither be created nor destroyed, but the Most High created all matter, right? Through the power of Yahweh Bashem, Yahweh Shai, right? So all matter. Now this darkness in the earth was void in form. These are things that are there that exist. 3. And Elohim said, "Let there be light," and there was light. So here the Most High made the light after the darkness. So darkness came first, then came the light. Okay, and Elohim saw the light that it was good, and Elohim divided the light from the darkness. So the darkness and the light, initially they were kind of fused together. So He divided them. These are two different balances of universal cosmic energy that the Most High created, and they were together, and then He made them separate. So He divided the light from the darkness. So at first they were all mixed together. Now remember, this light that He created is before the sun, before the moon, before the constellations, and before the earth were created. So the light is created, the first thing that He's created that we see in this account. Okay? It says, and Elohim saw the light that it was good. Okay, verse 5. And Elohim called the light day, and the darkness He called night. So they were together, and He divided them. So now they fused. Remember that they were fused together. But then they had separate elements that were separate elements of energy that were amplified. All right, that the Father Yahweh Shai divided them up. Okay, so once He divided them up, He said that the darkness is going to be called night, and the day He says is going to be called the light is going to be called day. Okay, so the day, Elohim called the light day. Okay, so when it was light outside, He said, "This is a day," and it was good. All right, and the darkness He called night. Genesis 1:5. So the darkness didn't have a name that He was using that we have right here So when he made that darkness, he said, okay, the darkness is going to be the night. Okay, now listen to what he said. So that's the day. We have the light, which is a form of day. Okay, Yom or Yawam. Okay, verse 6. Verse 5. And Elohim called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. Okay, so the evening and the morning. So that evening is when, kind of like when it was fused together, that kind of dusk, when he first created it. It was the darkness, and he made the light. So when he made the light, the darkness and the light were together. Just like in the evening time, the darkness and the light were together. So that fusing together was neither darkness nor night, neither darkness nor light, neither day nor night. It was fusing together, the same as it was from creation. Let me jump back up. In verse 4, the darkness. Okay, so between the light. Now let's look at this in the Hebrew, Genesis chapter 2, verse Genesis chapter 2, verse 4, Genesis 1, verse 4. It says Wayara'ah, meaning and saw, Elohim, the powers. It says Af, which means to or toward, Ha'awar, which means light. Okay, Kaya for Tawab. This says Waya Badal. Okay, so that division happened. Okay, Elohim Bayan, between the light and between Ha Chashak. So he separated between the light and the dark. There was no separation at first. Now that showed you how there was the darkness first. Then there was that period of light and dark together when he created the light. And then after that, he separated the light and the darkness. Okay? So that darkness was called night. Now remember, the darkness existed for the night. And the light existed before the day, and before the sun, before the moon, and before the planets, and before any constellations. So this is that universal cosmic energy when you're dealing with hydrogen and helium, mainly hydrogen, which is the most abundant element in the universe that we know of, okay? That we know of. So now, verse 5 again. The evening and the morning were the first day. So this is the first Yawam. So we have two kinds of Yawam we see from Genesis. A lot of people argue about what is the day. Well, you have two kinds of days. The first day is from the original creation, which is when he called the light, and the light got divided from the darkness. That was a day. But that day was part of an overall day that consisted of light and darkness. So when I say the evening and morning, where the first day is getting into the latter part, when he made that division, there's still a time period when you go from the light, or when you go from the darkness. You go from the light, and then it starts getting dark. And then once it gets dark, now you have the final part of the evening, and that's when you enter into a new day. That's when it said the evening and the morning, because the day starts at the evening. That's why he put the evening first. He said the evening and the morning were both. What did he say? The evening and the morning were the first day. And that shows clear as day that the evening and the morning are together as a day, the whole day. Okay? Just like we know that a day in our time consists of a certain amount of hours. And we have what's called daylight, which is separate from a full day. But we might just say daylight, or we might say day, a full day. You know, like it's been 2 days since I've seen you. Or you might just say, let's talk about it in a day. Okay. So now the point that I'm trying to make is that the daylight is different than the day itself. Clearly, when he made the day, he made it in a form to contrast to the darkness, and it became the day. But it was part of the time period called a day. So this time period called a day is when the light is out. That's the light part of the day. And then the time period day is the whole time period of evening and morning. That's what we see from Genesis chapter 1, verse 5. So now, let's keep going down. I want to jump to real quick. Jump to verse. Now remember, this is before the sun is created or the moon. Now, in verse 9, we see the waters gather together, and we see dry land appear on verse 9. Genesis 1 and 9. In Genesis 10, 1 and 10, and Elohim called the dry land Aratzah, which is earth. Okay. And the gathering together of the waters he called he seas. Now, verse 11. And Elohim said, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth, and it was so. Which means what? Which means that now we have vegetation and plants growing from the dirt before any sun, before any moon, before any star. That shows us that the cosmic energy that the Father Yahweh created, all right, and that the energy that comes from what they call the ultraviolet rays of the sun, and what you call things that promote chlorophyll production, is a system that actually can take place absent of the sun at the creation, because that energy was all raw. It hadn't been compacted into the different stars and suns yet. So it's just raw energy in the universe. And the Most High didn't separate it yet to become the sun and to become the moon. Okay. So now it says, once again, verse 8, it says the evening and the morning were the second day. Verse 12, verse 13, and the evening and the morning were the fourth day. Were the third day. Okay. Now, when you look in Psalms chapter 147, verse 4, it tells you that the Most High Yahweh, that he has a name for every star in the universe. So every star has a name. So that's how beyond comprehension the power is that we serve. He has a name for something that goes on forever, eternally. If you can understand that, that's a concept that we can't even fully grasp. Okay, so now, verse 14. This is the part we want to get to, dealing with the new moon. And Elohim said, "Let there be lights in the firmament." Okay, now these lights are not your ordinary stars. These lights are dealing with the constellations. Okay, constellations, the 12 groups of stars that are outside of the sun and the moon and our planet that we're on. And the sun and the moon, they rotate through the 12 constellations on a regular basis, a regular type of rotation. Okay, they rotate through these constellations. Okay, so now, Allah said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night." What divides the day from the night? What divides the day from the night is the stars. What stars is it talking about specifically? the stars called the constellations, which is called Mazzaroth in the book of Job. We're not going to go there now. We're going to keep it simple. It's called Mazzaroth in the book of Job. Okay, but we're not, like I said, we're not going to go there tonight. Today, we're going to keep it simple and straightforward. We're going to stay in the book where we are. But when you go into the book of Job, it does talk about Mazzaroth. Okay, now it says to divide the day from the night. And once again, in the Hebrew, let's go in verse 14. So in Genesis chapter 1, verse 14, and it says, Genesis chapter 1, Barasha 1:14. It says, La Habadiyal Bayan Hayawam Wabayan Ha Layala Wa Hayawa and B La Ata. Okay, so these lights in the firmament divide between, it says between the day and between the night. All right, so they're like a buffer zone between the day and the night. So when these constellations start to come out, remember you have two kinds of night. You have the night, Salak, you have two kinds of day. You have the day, which is the overall evening and morning, and then you have the day, which is when the sunlight is out, that we see in Genesis chapter 1, verse 4 and 5, when Yahweh divided the day, divided the darkness and the light from each other. All right. So this light that is talking about, this day and night is talking about, is the two segments of a whole day, with the night coming first and then the light coming first, the light coming second, okay, which is the day. And then when it's over, it's the nighttime, which is the beginning part of the day, which is the final part of the evening. Okay, you have when the evening first starts, which is dusk, and then you have an evening that's between dusk and final darkness, and then you have the evening that's at the final darkness. In astronomy, we have three periods of twilight or of evening, quote unquote, which depend on how much light is coming over the horizon as the sun is going down. You have astronomical, okay, you have civil, and you have nautical. Civil is when it just kind of starts to get dark, okay. Astronomical is when you can see the stars and stuff, start to get to see the stars outside. And then you have nautical when it's dark, when in the ocean you can see the darkness flickering from the lights that are in the sky, actually the firmament, okay, the lights in the firmament of heaven, okay. So now it says, so these lights are talking about the constellations. It's not talking about just the regular ambiguous stars, all right. It's not talking about the moon. It's not talking about the sun. And we're gonna show you, all right. So it says, and Elohim said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the night, the day from the night." So when the stars appear in the sky, that's when we're at the final stage of evening, and night takes over, and now you're officially in a new day. Okay. And let them be for signs. The signs is Ataf. All right. Now these things are signs, or like anchors, because remember, sign is power, mark in Hebrew. So these things are in the sky and they do mark. Now you have the Bible, it tells us that so that's just one aspect I'm gonna go into right now. Not gonna go too much deeper into it. All right. But these things are marking things in the sky. They're signs, so they mark divisions of the month, divisions of the year. They're markers. Okay. I thought they're signs, notices of what's happening with us time-wise on the earth. Okay, so it says as signs and for seasons. So this word where it says for sign season is mawaidim or moedim. Now, mawaidim means feast, or rather celebrations, because you have mawa'id, which is a water, then it's a hook, then it's an eye, then it's a door. Mawa'id. So this is something that there's a movement, then something is hooked, it's planted into a zone, and then the eye observes, and then something goes through a door. So this is talking about something that's a passage of movement of something, though it's planted. Okay, so things move through. The movement is the heavens and the waters in the sky. Okay, the hook is the actual constellations that are up there. Your eye sees them, and when your eye sees them, the sun and the moon pass through the door of each constellation. And as it passes through the door of each constellation, the earth goes through a different climatic vibration. Okay, it's going through a different climatic vibration. All right, the climate is different and it's changing as the everything's moving through these constellations. Okay, so it says divide the day and night, and let them be for signs and for seasons. Okay, with that word seasons should be celebrations or moedim, like a fixed time. Okay, moedim, mawaidim, and for days. So these constellations, we constantly are counting the days based on the constellations. Constantly counting days. Because remember, these divide the day from the night. So we count when the sun sets, we have another day started. Okay, when it's fully gone and the constellations are out, the constellation stars are out. Now we have a new day that has started. That's how they used to count the day. All right, that's how they used to count the day. Also, each day on this planet is working in the cycle, depending on how the moon is operating, where you have a cycle of constellations and arrangements of constellations that change according to what day it is. And it's a very keen science to know, okay, at this time on this new moon, this is what stars are going to be in what position. Now we've lost that science now, so we got to grab at other books to try to figure it out. But it's all right here inside the Bible. Josephus goes into a lot of some of the astronomy sciences. Astronomy meaning just the observation of the naming of the stars for our timekeeping purposes on the earth. I'm not talking about astrology, using the stars to try to get knowledge or making decisions in life. I'm not talking about that. For days and for what? Shanyam, for years. Shanyam, let them be for years in Genesis 1:14. Now, why did I say that there for years? Because you have like a 19-year cycle, every 3-year cycle, when the constellations are working on a pattern. And once the moon and the we begin back at the first constellation of spring, which is what they call Aries, so-called Aries. It's called the ram. Okay, you can call it a sheep, whatever you want to call it, but that's the first constellation, and that determines when the new year starts. When the sun gets in that constellation, when the sun and the moon are going to spend most of their passage time in that constellation. That's when we begin the new year. Not according to the vernal equinox, not according to the winter solstice, okay, not according to the autumn equinox, and not according to the winter solstice. We don't use the sun's intensity of heat on the earth, or how many hours of day and night we don't use that. We use the sun to determine the year is starting and when the year is ending. We don't use that. We clearly see in Genesis chapter 1 that we're supposed to be using these lights in the firmament. Now, I saw a video where someone tried to say, well, the lights in the firmament is talking about the sun, moon, and star. And my challenge is that it's not talking about the sun, moon, and star. Why? Because we see the sun, moon, and star being mentioned by name 2 verses later. Sun, moon, and star. It says that specifically. And then when we go into the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter we can say chapter, I think it's in chapter 43. We can use that one, but I kind of like to use the Wisdom of Solomon reference also. But in Ecclesiastes chapter 43 is where it makes that distinction. It talks about the moon specifically, but that Wisdom of Solomon is like the head chopper. Wisdom of Solomon, where he talks about the circle of stars specifically, and then he talks about the lights of heaven. You see that? So he categorizes it in all his wisdom into the same categories we see over here. All right, Wisdom of Solomon chapter. What, mama? Okay. Wait. Okay. ¿Será hasta en el cuarto allá? Allá. Okay, so we see Solomon made the same division. He talks about the circle of stars, and then he talks about the lights of heaven. All right. So we see circle of stars, which are lights in the firmament, and then we see the lights of heaven, which are also lights in the firmament. But we see a clear division between the two here in Genesis chapter 1, verse 14, also in Wisdom of Solomon chapter 13. All right. So now it says, so now we see that it's talking about lights in the heavens to separate the day and the night. Okay. So now in verse 15, and let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth. And it was so. You can write down also, you can write Job chapter 38, verse 31 and 32, where it talks about Pleiades, Orion, Mazzaroth in his season. See, Mazzaroth is talking about the constellation and talking about the Mazzaroth in his season. Why? Because the whole constellations have seasons that they are dealing with, whether it's dealing with cold and hot or planting or harvesting. Okay. Then it talks about guiding Arcturus with his sons. So this is talking about another constellation that we're going to get off into later on, maybe. Okay. But do the research on that and show into the scriptures. I can maybe go into I might be able to go into Arcturus. But once again, in Job chapter 38, verse 21 and 22, it talks about the Pleiades, the 7 stars of Pleiades, Orion, and then it talks about the actually for Pleiades, it tells us 7 stars, all right, 7 stars, and Orion. Then it talks about Mazzaroth, which are the 12 constellations. Okay. Now Arcturus, let's see if I can pull them up right here. For something real quick. Arcturus. Now remember, now for the most part, I like to stay with what the scripture is saying. Okay, let's stay with what the scripture is saying. Arcturus is the 4th brightest star in the sky. Okay, I'm trying to find a website that I went to already talking about Arcturus. Now Arcturus, he deals with the spring also. I believe he deals with the spring. When he's brightest. Bridgestes. ST. Anyway, we're not going to go into that right now. It's going to be a whole nother, whole nother tangent that we can't afford to take right now. So anyway, Genesis chapter 1 and 14, the lights in the firmament are talking about the constellation stars, not the sun and the moon. We're going to keep going and prove it. Now, and let them be for lights in the firmament of heaven to give light upon the earth, and it was so. All right. Now, the constellations, they always give light upon the earth as a cycle. The moon's intensity and the sun's intensity changes a lot. All right. It changes. Sometimes the moon doesn't give light upon the earth. So we can see just by that, you know what I'm saying, that this is a specific job that they have. And we're supposed to be using them for seasons and for nights to divide day and night. Okay, now let's go on to verse 16. And Elohim made 2 great lights. So you see that? Now we have 2 additional lights, 2 big lights in the sky, which shows us what? That these other lights referred to in Genesis 1:14 are talking about just regular lights. But these other ones are great lights. Okay, let's look at verse 16. Let's see what the Hebrew says. Now, what I'm just using a kumash. Kumash means 5 kawamash right there. Kamasha, okay. Kawamashia, Tawada. All right, so it's a 5. The group of 5 for the 5 parts of the Tawada of the Torah. Okay, so that's it right there. So this is what I'm using. It has English and Hebrew inside of it. All right, so I'm not just like a raw with the Hebrew like that, but it has Hebrew and English. But it helps to build up your Hebrew vocabulary. So now it says in verse 16. Let's read that. It says, "Why Isha and made Elohim powers Af Shanya 2." It says Ha Ma'araf, which is luminaries. Then it says Ha Gadalium, which means great brightnesses, great lights. So they made 2 great bright lights in the heavens, and that's all we have. We have 2 great bright lights that shine on a regular basis with different intensities, but they shine on a regular basis. Okay, so he says Ha Ma'awar, the luminary or the light, Ha Gadal La Mamashalah, to rule. Mashal is rule. Hamashalah Hayawam, to rule the day, which this is talking about the sun he made to rule the day. Then it says Wa'af, and to a toward Ha Ma'awar, the brightness, the bright one. Okay. Ha Quatan, the smaller of the great lights. Okay. La Mamashalah, to rule Ha La Yala. Okay. Then it says Wa'af Ha Kawakabium. Okay. So it says, so he made a greater light, which is the sun, and a lesser light, which is the moon. So the lesser light he made as the moon to rule the night. The greater light as the sun. Is out, the day is over. I mean, the day is in effect, in full effect, boy. So it's in effect when the sun is out. Okay. Now, when the sun goes down completely, that's when a new day starts. And that's when the moon rules the night. That's why you must have the sun fully set before you say it's the beginning of a new day. 6 p.m. is not the beginning of a new day. 6 p.m. is the beginning of the sun getting more serious about going down. And the sun is a masculine force. That's why the Bible calls the sun a he. And it calls the moon a feminine force, a she. Okay? It's a she. So now the point is that we have 3 types of lights now. In Genesis 1:14, we have the lights that are the firmament that are in the firmaments that to give light upon the earth, to divide the day from the night, and also what? To be for signs, seasons, days, and years. And I explained what that's talking about already because it's right here, simple as day. All right. These things are for signs. All right. I'm gonna go back to verse 14. Okay. He says, "Well, Ya'amar Yahya Ma'arath." Okay, Ba Rakwayai, cycle of movement. And that's where we get the holidays from. Okay. These are from our idea. That's when you go into Genesis chapter 20. Real quick. I'm going once again. I'm gonna go into the we're gonna go into the Hebrew in Leviticus chapter 23. And like I said, I'm not no big Hebrew scholar. I'm not boasting or bragging. I know the Hebrew, whatever. I just want to know what the word meant in its original context when I study. So I don't got to be, uninformed. I don't got to be uninformed. It was like I was having a conversation with my son earlier. He was telling me what his teacher said, and he's trying to translate it into English. I say, no, don't tell me in English, man. Tell me in Spanish the way she told you, so I can understand exactly what her words are. So sometimes a translation is better than getting somebody interpreting what's supposed to be said, for you. So here's Deuteronomy chapter 23, 24. It says, Genesis chapter 23, verse 2. It says, Dabar al banya yashal Allah la amar al-ham Yahweh Ashera takwara awa atam makwara aya kodash alha ham mawaidia. You see that? So the Most High said, these are my feasts. These are my feasts. And he says, these are my appointed times. Mawaidia is an appointed time. So he says, I'm sorry. In the Hebrew, it says, speak unto children he prince power, and say to them, special times, appointed times, seasonal times, things that come around in a cycle. Because remember that word mawa'id, it means water, hook, eye, and door. Okay. The mawa'idya of Yahweh, Asherah, that you, Thakwara'a, that you shall call or proclaim. So if you proclaim something, that means that we know that these things are upon us and when they're coming. So everybody just look at the sun and the moon, but both of those are wrong. You're supposed to be looking at the stars first to determine when you're in the right season for planting, when you're in the right season for harvesting, when you're in the new year is beginning. Not to read your palms and say what's a lucky day or unlucky day for. We're not talking about that. We're talking about strictly timekeeping, strictly agriculture. That's it. Even though they do say it's a good time to trim your hair, okay, on the new moon, which I can believe that. You know what I'm saying? It's because everything's new. The whole vibration on the earth, is changed. A little piece of paper in my hair. whole vibration is changing. So anyway, I want to show that my idea. When you look inside the English Bible in Genesis chapter 3, in Leviticus chapter 23, when it says, these are the feasts of the Lord, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations. In the Hebrew, it says, in the Hebrew, it doesn't say that. They translated this right here to say, let me say, these are my holy feast. So when it says holy convocation, it doesn't say convocation in Hebrew. It says moedim. All right, it says moed, which is a singular, kind of a plural. It says mawaidia. So this same word that we have in Leviticus 23 and 2, where it says feast and holy convocation, it's the same word, okay? Which they translated in here as appointed festivals and appointed festivals twice. I'm sorry, I made a mistake, made a terrible mistake. Where it says feast in Leviticus 23 verse 2, feast of Yahweh and my feast. That word in Hebrew is mawaidia. So you can take mawa'id and you can use feast. Chapter 1, verse 14, when it says, let them be for seasons. It's the same word. Seasons and festival, season and feast is the same word in Hebrew from Genesis 1:14 over into Leviticus chapter 23, verse 2, showing you that a feast comes around every so often, but it's planted against what? What's happening with the moon. And the moon is planted, how you count the moon is planted against what? What's happening with the movement of the moon in a particular constellation. Okay, so that's how we figure out what new moon we're supposed to be in. Well, the first new moon we know is in the springtime, which is going to be the constellation of so-called Aries, all right, which is the in the springtime. So now in Genesis 1:16, and we'll let's go back. A lights in the first, we have a group of lights. Let's call that one. We have a group of lights, one, and then we have a greater light, two, and then we have a greater less light, three. So you have three kinds of lights right now, or do we? No, we don't. We have four. What's the fourth one? The fourth one is the light that was created first in Genesis chapter 1, verse 3, when he said, let there be light. So Genesis 1 and 3, that's the first light. Okay. Genesis 1:14 is the lights in the firmament. Genesis 1:16 gives us two other lights. Okay. So now let's keep going. It says the lesser light to rule the night. I read that in Hebrew already. Now it says he made the stars also. That's a 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the fifth category now. 5 kinds of lights. So we got 5 kinds of lights now. 5 groups of lights. We have the natural element of light in the universe that was created in Genesis 1 and 3. That's the first one. The second light that we have is the light with the well, you could actually, well, you know what? We're gonna call it 6 lights. Pardon me. I'm sorry. Let's call it 6 lights. I'm gonna show you why. Because first we have the light that was created. Well, actually we can call it 5. We have the light that was created. And then from the light that was created, it was divided, and then that light was also called a day. But the regular light in the universe still exists. It still exists in the universe. You understand? It still exists, and that's off. Why am I saying that? Because the book of Enoch tells you that the third portal, that's when you have the equinox, when it's equal parts night with the daytime. Where the third portal is the third month. That's the third portal, the third constellation. You see, and that's going to be in the fall, in the springtime now. All right, from the third from when? The third from January, February, March. You see that? So how you got the book of Enoch using January, February, March to count seasons and years? Why didn't they say it's the first portal? Why they call it the third portal? The third compared to what? We know what happens around March. So March is 3, February is 2, and January is 1. So why is the book of Enoch counting from January as number 1? Because the book of Enoch was created when the Gentile calendar was already up and running. All right, it was up and running. So they'd already been using that winter time as the end of it. So we're talking about, after the 1800s. Because up to the 1800s, they were still using January, using April as the beginning of the year. After that, they started using January. Even the Greeks used the spring as the beginning of the year. But this is going into Janus, which was the god of doors and beginnings and openings. So the book of Enoch itself is giving ode and reverence to Janus, because he was the so-called god of beginnings. So the book of Enoch is using January as the first portal, because that's when it's, that's when number 1 would be. Number 2 would be so-called February. Then number 3, which they call the third portal, when the equinox takes place, is going to be in March, which is the third month of the year. So they call the third month the third portal. But when January actually, all right, going into the 11th month of the year, it could be 10th or 11th, and then February is going into the 11th or the 12th, and then March is going into the 12th or the 1st, and then April can be the first month of the year, depending on how it falls within the constellation. Remember, constellation, or it could be the second month of the year. Usually, it's going to be the second month of the year. Sometime in mid to early April is going to go into the second month of the year. I'm sorry, not mid. Usually like mid, like the second or the third week, because the New Year's usually going to start on between like maybe the first and the second month of the year. So now when it talks about the Passover happening within its season, it's actually talking about Passover has to take place when the moon and the sun have moved into a particular constellation, not the daggone sun, not the daggone moon. How do we know that? Because the first lights that we have mentioned, which is the constellation, are what we're supposed to be using for the Mawa'ayim, for the feast, for the seasons, for the festivals. Because remember, that word season right there is the same word that we see over in Wisdom of Solomon. Okay, it's the same thing we see, over in Leviticus chapter 23, verse 2. All right. So now when it talks about seasons, also the moon is now what declares this is the month of blank. This is the first month. This is Abib. This is Abyab. This is the second month. This is it's the moon that actually declares what month we're in. Okay. Notice it says that the days and the years were supposed to be by the constellations, but the month themselves are being used, are being figured by the movement of the moon, and we see that also inside of Ecclesiasticus chapter 43. But we're not going to get into it right now. Once again, we're trying to keep it basic. That's another class, which we'll probably do, called How Do You Determine the New Moon? Okay. How do you determine the month? When does the month start? And on that one, hopefully we can go into the crescent moon, the dark moon, and the white moon and make that contrast. Now remember, in Genesis 1:13, Genesis 1:13, 1:14 rather, we see that the constellations are all being referred to. Okay, that's the second type of light we see. So he put these things up to be lights in the firmament. Okay, the 12 constellations for seasons, which we know that word seasons is going into a word that's also translated as feast in Leviticus chapter 2, chapter 20, verse 2. Okay, now jump down to Genesis chapter 1, verse 16. Okay, it says, and Elohim made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. So the stars are another group of lights that we see in Genesis chapter 1, verse 16. We see three groups in verse 16. We see the sun, the greater light. We see the moon, the lesser light, or the small light. The sun is called the big light. And then we have the moon being called the small light. Now, how is the book of Enoch going to say that the sun and the moon are the same size when the scripture says that they're the moon is small? Now it used the word quartan. Quartan is not dealing with brightness. Quartan is the word that deals with size. It deals with size. Look up the word quartan in the Hebrew. It deals with size. Okay, so the sun is called the bigger light, and the moon is called the small, or the quartan. So he made these to rule the day and the night. The sun rules the day, and the moon rules the night. The lesser light rules the night. He made the stars also. So now he made the another group of lights called the stars in verse 16. So a lot of people go to verse 14, and when you go to, and you want to start talking about the sun and the moon and stars in verse, all the stars in 14. You can't do that, because now we have verse 16 with the actual making, the creating of the sun and moon in 16. So in verse 14 of Genesis 1, there is no sun, there is no moon, there are no stars outside of the firmaments. So in this firmament, now we have stars or lights. Let's call them lights. Okay. Now Solomon calls them the circle of stars. That's what Solomon calls them. Okay. Solomon calls them the circle of stars. Okay. So now that's, hey, Shalom Ak over in YouTube. What's going on with you, man? Yeah, I'm trying, man. I'm trying to edify the brothers and sisters, man, with a little bit that Yahweh Shai has allowed me to have, man. All right. Anytime, brother. All right. Had to change that anytime, brother. All right. So now the moon and the sun and the stars are in verse 16, not verse 14. 14 only has the constellations. And this division we see taking place in different parts of the Bible. Okay, now, quick note. I'm going to keep reading verse 16. Okay. And Elohim set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And Elohim saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning and the morning were what? The evening and the morning were the fourth day. So the evening and the morning were the fourth day. So the moon was created on the fourth day. And we know that 3 days later, we had a Sabbath. So how are we going to have a Sabbath 3 days later after the creation of the moon? And when the Most High created the moon, he wasn't using it for a month. He wasn't using it for a Sabbath. He just made the moon. And when he made the moon was bright. But he wasn't using it to count the month. And he didn't create it, to to say, well, okay, this is going to be the Sabbath, what we're going to use to make the Sabbath. Okay. And which I don't really like to jump around too much, but in the book of Second Ezra, First Ezra. In the book of Second Ezra, chapter Second Ezra, chapter 6. Second Ezra, chapter 6. And I'm going to read verse 45. It says, upon the fourth day, thou commandest that the sun should shine, and the moon give her light, and the stars should be in order, and gave them a charge to do service unto man that was to be made. So I want to point out a couple of things in this verse. It shows us, number one, that when the sun and the moon were made, they were made with light. Okay, so the moon and the moon give her light. So when the moon was made, she was given light. So she was created in the opposite area of the sun. Okay, so now he made the stars that they should be in order. So now that takes us back to Genesis chapter 1, verse 14 and verse 16. See, now you see how we have two sets of stars. Why? Because he's only mentioning the sun, the moon, and the stars. So we got two sets of stars, the constellation and then the other stars. The constellations are the lights in the firmament from Genesis 1, 14. These are stars. And then in Genesis chapter 1, verse 16, but these groups of stars that we see in Genesis 1 and 14 are called the lights in the firmament. And these are for days and for years and for seasons. Okay. All right. So that's why he created these things. All right. For signs and for seasons and for days and for now the other stars have a purpose also, but that purpose was unfolding for us to understand as time went on. But he's saying to Adam and to Adam's sons, and Adam told his generation, this is why the Most High made these lights in the firmament for us for years, for signs, okay, for days, okay, and for seasons. Seasons meaning different celebration and worship time, because that word there is mawa'idya, some things that happen on a cycle type of rotation. Okay, so these are the things that we see from Second Ezra chapter 6, verse 45. Now it say he gave them in Second Ezra chapter 6, verse 46. It says that he gave them charge to do service to man. So he commanded the moon to do a job for mankind. Now, when you go into the book of Enoch, it says that the sun is going to get weak. The moon is going to get weak. It's going to get slow and stop doing his job. That totally contradicts Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 35, rather, when it says that if the moon and the stars and the suns, the ordinance of heaven, if they depart from being is going to stop being a nation before the Most High. Going to stop being the Most High's people, which means what? The sun is still doing his job. The moon is still doing her job, which means that we're not supposed to use the sun because the moon got slow. We're still supposed to be using the moon, and we're using the moon along with the constellation. We're using the moon according to the constellation. Why? Because the moon wasn't created to cover the framework of the year. That's why the first group of lights in the firmament were created in Genesis chapter 1, verse 14. So I hope we get an understanding of that part of the moon from Genesis 1:14. Now, for somebody to try to use this verse in Genesis 1:14 to say, oh, well, yeah, it doesn't, it shows you that the new moon was white. Now, it doesn't show the new moon was white. It shows that when the new moon was created, it was created white. But it doesn't tell us when the year starts. Why? Because the year is determined by the constellation. And the moon within the year, when we have a new month of that year, or the second month of the year, the second month of the Shanya, the first month of the Shanya, the third month of the Shanya, that's determined by what constellation. When the moon makes her pass through the 12 constellations, that's when we count the months of the year. But it's based on that framework of the 12 constellations that the Most High put into heavens. Okay, so that's in Genesis chapter 1, and the meat of that explanation is going into verse 14 and 16. Okay, so now from Genesis, I think where we want to go to now. Now remember, Genesis chapter 1 does not. It shows you that the Sabbath was counted by 7 periods of evening and morning, which justifies the observation of the Sabbath on a 7. Well, the moon was not used for the Sabbath. The moon was created on the 4th day, and when it was created bright. All right, and then 3 days later, what do? We observe, the Most High observed the Shabbat. He observed a rest period. Okay, so we said the new moon is not used for the Sabbath. Now we said the new moon was created. The moon was created when it was white. The Most High created it bright. Okay, but when He created it bright, what happened? It continued and ran its cycle until it came into the place where it was a new moon. Now, to use psychology and say, if you take something to, a child and say, which is new, something dark and something light, which they're gonna call new. Okay, they're gonna call they're gonna say that that the bright one is new. Okay, well that's just that's not really a good analogy, because that's not a perfect example. Examples like what? If you take a piece of charcoal from a grill that's white, that's white but still intact, or that's bright and still intact, or that's black and still intact. Okay. The one that's the newest is going to be the black one. It's not bright, but it's still newest. It hasn't been used. It's in its perfect form as charcoal. As charcoal. Okay. If you take there's other things in nature also that start out light and end up dark, and then some things that start up dark end up light. You can't use examples unless you see those examples in the scriptures. You can't try to use an analogy, and if you get caught up trying to justify your point based on an analogy, well, that's not really being led by the Holy Spirit. It's being led by psychology and slick words, and you can't get caught up on that. You got to get caught up on the scripture. You got to get caught up on what does the Most High say, and prove your point from there. Don't try to use different analogies, when you're talking and teaching the Bible. Use the Bible and find an analogy in the Bible. Find an example in the Bible and use that Bible to make your point from the Bible. You understand what I'm saying? We're using the Bible. I'm not going outside the Bible. I'm trying not to go outside the chapter, man, because the chapter that we're in should be able to give us enough understanding to make a conclusion on what is the proper doctrine. Okay, so now we see that when He made the light and when He made the days, we had 7 days. Now the days according to when he made the moon. The days were counted by a period of darkness and a period of light. And that's how you have to count the Hebrew day according to Genesis chapter 1, round about verses 1 through 5. Read that and show me how you begin the day at noon. It's not in the Bible. It's something that somebody made up later because they want to pollute half of the Sabbath. And then they want to. It's already polluted. Now, you might not be doing this deliberately. You might have been doing it just, out of ignorance. You think that whoever taught you is right. But if you can't prove it about the day, Genesis 1, that's where we got the day from. Now, if you want to talk about the moon and the new moon, we're not going to find that in Genesis chapter 1 in detail. Well, we will find the constellation in detail, the purpose of the moon and the sun in detail. The Most High didn't give us every answer in the first book of the Bible, the first chapter of the Bible. So we got to get established on this, first. Once we get established on this first, now we can move toward towards something else. All right. So now, I think that what I wanted to do was to go into the so many verses to go into. Let me see. We want to go into the I want to go into real quick the new moon being a black moon instead of a crescent moon, or instead of being a full moon. And I'm going to go into a verse where it talks about the moon specifically. All right, we're going into Psalms chapter 81, and we're going to go into verse 3. Okay, so turn, if you can, with me to Psalms 81 and 3. Okay, so now what we have is, now once again, when you're looking at these verses, man, you have to look at them through the spirit of Yahweh Bashem Hamashiach Yahweh Shai. You got to look at them from the Hebrew, okay? And most of all, you got to look at them from this perspective of in the Apocrypha. The Ecclesiasticus chapter 21 verse 11. It says, he that keepeth the law, that means he that guards, he that protects, he that shamar the law, guards, protects, and keeps. He that keepeth the law. All right. So he that keepeth the law is what? It's 12. He that keepeth the law of Yahweh, when you guard and protect the law of the Most High, when you on a super brew level, as people like to say, he that keeps the law of Yahweh getteth the understanding thereof. So when you keep the law, you're going to get the understanding of the holy days, the understanding of the Torah, the understanding of the new moon. Why? Because all these things are inside of the law, the sacrifices for the new moon, the moon's creation in Genesis chapter 1, the holy days that we see in Leviticus chapter 23 and Deuteronomy chapter 16. These are all points of the law that you're not going to understand unless you're keeping the law of the Most High. If you ain't keeping his law, you ain't getting the full understanding of working in obedience in his laws. Okay? So he said, he that keepeth the law of Yahweh getteth the understanding thereof. And the perfection of the fear of Yahweh is wisdom, which means perfection of the fear of Yahweh means the fullness and the perfection of you doing all you can to be obedient to Yahweh. Why? Because you respect him, you fear him. And when you fear him, that's when you start to get the understanding of wisdom, how to operate and move in wisdom. And a lot of us are not walking in, wisdom right now because we're not keeping his commandments. We're not keeping his commandments. In the book of Genesis, Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse, I'm going to edify on this verse right here. Ecclesiasticus chapter 21:11. To edify, I'm going to go into the law, which is in Deuteronomy chapter 4. I'm going to read verse 5 and 6. Behold, I have taught you statutes and judgments, even as Yahweh my Elohim commanded me, that ye should do so in the land whither ye go to possess it. So I taught you laws, commandments, statutes to keep them. Okay. Therefore, keep and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding. All right. In the sight of the nations, which shall hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. Number one, it don't sound like the law is going to be done away with. Number two, when the other people look at the laws and the commandments and the statutes of the Most High, and they see us doing them, then they say, oh, these people have wisdom. They have understanding. Okay? Then they can say that we're so great and we're so righteous as all this law. All right? So now we got to teach them to our sons and our sons' sons. So we're teaching the first and second generation after us. All right? So now, that's Deuteronomy chapter 4, verses 5 through 9. Okay? 5 through 9. So now, that links back up. If you don't keep the commandments, the Most High has blocked you from having understanding, all right, of his laws. You're not going to understand his law. That's what he said. Let me read it again. Ecclesiasticus 21:11. He that keepeth the law of Yahweh getteth the understanding thereof. So if you keep the law, you get understanding. If you don't keep the law, you don't get the understanding. Okay? You don't get the understanding if you don't keep his law. So if you want to get more understanding of the law, tighten up your obedience to the Most High. Because it tells you also that when you start to the perfection of the fear of Yahweh is wisdom. So once you determine in your mind, I'm going to keep his word. It might be hard for me, but I'm going to do it. That's when wisdom starts to come on you also. Okay? So now the point I was making was the understanding that we can get in the book of Psalms chapter 81. Okay? So if you got a Hebrew Bible, go with me to your Hebrew Bibles to Psalms 81. And we show you how the new moon is black. Very simple verse. Psalms 81 and verse 3. Okay. It says, blow in the new month the trumpet. Okay. That's what it says. So now it says, blow in the new moon the Kadash, the trumpet. Then it says, Ba Kasah. Now, when you look at this word, they tell you that it means, you can see right there. I don't know if you can see it. I'm going to show you real quick. Let me touch it. Come on the screen. See what they say? Let me try to get it for you. All right, so let me get that word. Time appointed. And that's a lie. It doesn't mean time appointed. The word kasa, okay, which means to cover, to conceal. So it literally says, blow in the month, the new month, the trumpet in the concealing. That's what it says in the Hebrew. So it says daqwe. It says daqiwa ba kadash. Daqiwa ba kadash. It says shawapar, blow the shofar in the new month. Then it says ba kasa, which means in the concealing. Okay, in the concealing. And then it says la, meaning to or even up to, yawam ha. It says yawam chadnawa, the day of our feast. Okay, and we have one new moon feast that takes place on the on a new moon, on a Kadash, and that will be the feast of the feast of the memorial of the blowing of trumpets. Okay, but this is going into just blowing the trumpet in general in the new moon. I'm gonna show you. Not only one time a year. This is Numbers 25 and 9. I'm sorry, Numbers. Excuse me. Well, that's talking about the Jubilee. Make the trumpet sound on the 7th month, the 10th day. Okay. So, but let me go back into this verse itself. For this was a statute for Israel and a law of the God of Jacob. This he ordained in Yahweh for a testimony when he went out through the land of Egypt, where I heard a language that I understood not. Okay. So now it's telling you that when you blow the trumpet, you're blowing it in a day when the moon is concealed. That's the exact word. Now, when you look in the Bible, in the English, it says, blow up the trumpet in the new moon in the time appointed on our solemn feast day. And even when you look on the famous blue letter Bible or eSword, it's going to say at the full moon, at the festival, or it's going to say at the feast. This word is used in the Bible. It says to conceal, to cover, which means it's nothing of it that's visible. which means if the moon is not visible, it means that there's no waxing crescent and there's no waning crescent. If there's no waxing or waning crescent, if there's darkness, that means there's darkness. If there's darkness, that means that it's in front of the sun. And if it's in front of the sun, that means that you have a time period before and after where you can measure the light, which means that the greatest intensity of the least amount of light is when you begin that new cycle of a new month, when it starts again. It's a light which decreases in her perfection. Okay. Decreases in her perfection. And that's what we see right here. It says the new moon, blow the trumpet in the new moon in the concealing. Okay, that's what it literally says. It says blow the trumpet in the new moon. Then it says at the full. But in the Hebrew, once again, that word kasa'ah does not mean full. Search any records. Okay, this is Strong's number 3677. If you want to use the Strong as your end-all be-all, which it isn't, but in this case, it gives you the root word, which is kasa'ah. All right, now I can't go into the don't you got the, let me see the book you got where you can look up the verse from the Strong's number. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now I'm going to I don't know if I don't know where my let me get the Strong's real quick. I'm gonna look up this word for you from the Strong's. Now, right here, I have the Strong's. You know, now I use it pretty much as a dictionary to look up the different words. Okay, you can use it as a concordance. That's good, but I like to use it personally, you know, as a dictionary, because that way I can see what the word means, how to say it, and what's used in different verses, which is very key to understanding anything that you're teaching. Okay, so now when you look up this word, kasa, sa-I, okay, kasa. Same thing. Oh, forgot. It's kind of okay. So, kasa. Now, it has it right here. I wish I can do the screen share joint with y'all right now. All right, so I'm gonna show it to you right here. 77. See that? 77. Right there. Yeah, it's right there. All right. Right there, 77. So I'm gonna read it to you now. So it says, Kasa. Okay. First of all, what I don't understand is the first letter in the word means to cover. That's the first letter of the word, ka. Ka is the Hebrew word, the Hebrew letter sound for the word kap, which means the palm of your hand. Palm. So it says, which means it gives a sense to cover or to contain something. Okay? So it says kasa. Okay? It says apparently from Strong's number 3680, which means properly the fullness or the full moon, i.e. its festival, the time appointed. Now, we already saw the word from time appointed, which is Mawa'idya. We saw that back in Genesis chapter 1, verse 14, and we saw that from Leviticus chapter 23, verse 2. we looked at it in the Hebrew. That's why we got to look in the Hebrew, because they'll throw a word out there and they'll just like expect us to just pick it up and run with it. And this was done very strategically, probably not deliberately, by spiritual forces that's trying to throw us all off course. So we got to dig in and study to show ourselves approved. Even when we're studying the Hebrew, sometimes we move to the into the Samaritan Torah, so we can see what it says, in an older version of the Hebrew Torah. Okay, so it says the full moon, i.e., its festival. What full moon festival, man? We didn't have no festival on a new moon, which is going to be the middle of the month, around the 15th of the month, where we had to blow any trumpets, blow a horn, a shower part. So what festival is it talking about? All of our festivals are in the middle of the month. One is on the 15th of the month, and the other one's on the 15th of the month, which is talking about Chag Matzazawa, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and Chag Sakwat, the Feast of Booths. And neither one of them feasts take place with us having a big blowing of trumpets. Neither one we're commanded to blow the trumpets. So the trumpets that we did blow was at the beginning of the month. So now let's continue on. The next word over here is kasa. Okay? It says kasa comes from the Strong's 3680, and it means I think they're saying it's a proposition. They say it means covered. So wait up. You got two words. One means the white moon that's not covered, that's exposed to direct rays from the sun. And the other one is the opposite, something that's covered. That don't make sense, you see? It says it also means thrown as canopy. I guess the original thrones had something over top of them covering them. Okay? Like if the king was going through a place, he would have a canopy over top of him. Okay? Now it says that it comes from 3680. Let's look at 3680. Now this is just etymological. If you look in a Klein's etymological dictionary of the Hebrew language, you will probably see this word being used. Okay? I think it's used, this word, now that I'm thinking about it, I think that word kasa is, I'm going to come back to this Psalms right here. But that word kasa, if I remember correctly, is used in Proverbs when it talks about the good man is gone and he'll be back. He took a bag of money and he won't be back until the appointed time. I think that's chapter Proverbs. It's not chapter 2. Okay. Let's see. I think it's 7. Proverbs chapter 7, verse 11. She is loud and stubborn. Her feet abide not in her house. You see that? That's a sign of a woman whose feet don't want to be in her house. Because she bored, because she tired of being here, because she want to change the scenery, whatever the reason is. Now is she without, now in the street, and lieth in wait in every corner. This is Proverbs chapter 7, verse 11 and 12. Now, let me read what it says in verse 19. It says, for the good man, this is Proverbs 7:19. This is what the woman that was a adulteress or a harlot said. She said, for the good man is not at home. He is gone on a long journey. He has taken a bag of money with him and will not come home, and will come home at the appointed time. Now, I'm gonna show you something, how tricky these people are, man. Do not use the Strongs like it's a Bible. Do not use these Gentiles definitions as if they're the word of the Most High, pure. You got to go into and you got to do this yourself, man. Okay. Okay, this is let's go back into Proverbs, chapter 7. I'm gonna read verse 20. Let's check out what that says. Now, this is mind-blowing to me. I'm gonna tell you why. All right, like the brother Malachi said, trip off this. Now trip on this, right? Trip on this. Trip off this, right? In Proverbs chapter 8, okay, we see Proverbs chapter 7, verse 20. It says, he has taken a bag of money with him and will come home at the day appointed. Look what it says in the Hebrew. It says at the day appointed right there. It says that the word there, it says, or the new moon. I'm going to show you in my Bible, which is the Cambridge English Bible from the Cambridge University. All right. Right here, number 8 right there. With my fingers at right here. Okay. Right there. It says at the day appointed right there. Day appointed. See that? Day appointed. Now, if you look at the footnote on the side at number 8 right here. Right there, number 8, what does it say? It says new moon. I hope you can see that. It says new moon. So when they translated this, they put a footnote in here that meant the new moon. That this word kasa'ah means the new. I'm going to show you over here too. Now in the Hebrew Bible, it says the same thing. It says same thing as the other one. Time appointed. See that? Okay. It's time appointed. So it say time appointed. Okay. So over in Psalms chapter 81, verse 23, it says at the time appointed, and the Hebrew word is kasa'ah, but it doesn't have a footnote here. When you go into Proverbs, Proverbs chapter 7, verse 19. I'm sorry, verse 20. It says the day appointed, which in the Hebrew it says kasa'ah. Now over here they translated kasa'ah to mean the new moon. But when you look in the concordance, it says something that's covered. You see, something that's covered. That's what it says. So the point I'm making is that in the Hebrew it has the right word. So let's go back into the Strong's, and we're gonna go into what they say this word means, which is this is the dictionary I'm reading. Okay, this next word it says 7680, which is in the Strong's. It says a veiling, a covering, a raiment, or a vesture. Does that seem like something exposed or something that's covered? You see? So we blow up the trumpet, the shawapar, in the new moon. Okay, at the day, at the concealing is what it says in the Hebrew. So even though it says right here, it says at the I'm sorry, I'm in Proverbs. I'm gonna go back to Psalms. All right, go back to Psalms. So it says I think it said at the time appointed once again. Blow up the trumpet Psalms 81:3. Blow up the trumpet in the new moon, the Kadash. Okay, in the time appointed, meaning at the concealing. Then it says at the solemn feast day. But when it says solemn feast day, okay, does it really say that? Does it really say that? Okay. So we have to be, you have to look into the Hebrew. So it's telling you right here that the new moon is concealed. It's concealed. I mean, it's in plain English. Well, it's in Hebrew, but you got to look at the English, and then you'll see what the Hebrew says. You got to look at the Hebrew, and then you'll see what the Hebrew says. You got to give respect to your language, man. If you keep trying to argue and debate and figure out what's right and what's wrong using some Gentile dictionary without doing your own research, without learning your own language, without seeing what processes people go through to get this understanding, you're going to be lost in the sauce, man. Right? So Psalms 183, it says, La Yawam Chagnawa, the day of our feast. Okay? So blow the trumpet on the feast. Then it says blow it in the new moon also. It says blow the new moon in full. Okay? So there's two prepositions. One is ba kasa, or ba kese, and then it says leyom, which is la yawam, okay, to the day of or in the day of. So it's telling you two different times to blow it. One is that the new moon. So listen how it says it too. It says blow in the new moon, trumpet in the full. So trumpet is being used. Now you have a mandate, which is a verb mandate, and then you have a preposition with a noun, and then you have another noun, which is the object of the first verb, telling you what to do. So it says, this is what you do, this is when you do it, this is what you use to do it, this is when you do it. So if the way the Most High had Malak Dawad write this proverb, or write this psalm, is that it broke up the normal sentence structure. Okay, so it's almost like blow the trumpet. Blow the trumpet at the blow the trumpet at the beginning of school. It says blow at the beginning. I'm gonna give you the metaphor. Blow, but it's gonna go in line with what we're reading. Blow at the beginning of school the trumpet at the ringing of the bell. You see? So the new moon and the kasa'ah, which means the concealing, those two go together. Blow and trumpet go together. So the format was, and it's very poetic how they did it. You don't see this often in the scriptures. You have a mandate, noun, and then you have a noun and a noun. Okay? But the mandate and the second noun go together. I mean, the mandate and the third noun go together, which is blow and trumpet. And then the second noun and the third noun go together, which means the month, and then it says at the concealing. You see? So, I mean, this is very clear, very cut. I could have just read the scripture in the English, and in the English, we're not gonna get to understand it. That's why we got to go into the Hebrew. And even when we got to go into the Hebrew, what I teach brothers and sisters is that when you go into the Hebrew, you can't just go to one verse and see how this word is used. You got to go and see how it's used consistently throughout the rest of the Bible. How is it used consistently? How is it used in other places? What does it mean in other places? And what is the meaning of the symbols of the letters? So this is a covering, and then it's a samak, which is like a sign, standard, support. And then there's what? After that, you have the ha, which means behold. So how are we beholding something when it's covered pertaining to the moon, because this is the new moon. All right, so that shows you how the new moon. Now this is Psalms. We didn't even get into other scriptures yet. What I want to do now, I think I want to go into the fact about the to back up what this is saying. We're going to go to the son of David, which is Solomon. So Solomon already, David Dawad, Malak Dawad already tells us in Psalms 81:3, blow the trumpet in the new moon. It says, blow in the new moon the trumpet in the concealing. That's what it literally says. It says, blow in the new month the trumpet in the concealing. So it's telling you that the concealing of the moon is when the trumpet was blown. Concealing meaning it wasn't light on the left or the right. Wasn't no waxing crescent with a crescent on the left side, crescent on the right side getting bigger, and there wasn't no waning crescent with a crescent on the left side getting smaller. It was perfectly aligned in the middle. Okay, the Most High makes things, because if the first moon is the crescent moon, then the opposite should apply. So the full moon should be if the first moon is a waxing crescent, then the next moon after the middle of the month should be a waxing or a waning gibbous. A waning gibbous. Because that's the only way you're going to get 14, 15 days in the middle of the month is by a waning gibbous. So even the math is off. Because when you count from the middle, it's waning now. Because you've already missed 2 days of the new moon when you're counting out the waxing crescent. You see? The waxing crescent. So when you get to the when it's perfectly round at the 14th or the 15th day, now you're talking about a waxing crescent is a waning crescent happens after that. A waning gibbous. Gibbous meaning it's full, and waning meaning now the fullness is getting smaller. The reason I do it like that is because the Most High made everything to be he made everything in opposites and everything in twos. And there's no opposite of there's no opposite. The only opposite of a waxing crescent is a waning gibbous. So the only opposite of the blackness of the moon getting light is the fullness of the moon getting dark, waning gibbous. Let's look at Ecclesiasticus chapter 33, and let's read verse 14 and 15. See what the Most High said. Good is set against evil, polarity, negative and positive, and life against death, opposite ends of the track. One you born into the world, and the next you go from the world, light and dark. So is the godly against the sinner. So those that are trying to be like the Most High, godly, be like the powers. How do we get like the powers? By doing what he said to do, Yahweh said to do. That makes us godly. If we keeping Yahweh's laws and commandments and following after Yahweh Shai and walking in wisdom, that makes us godly. Okay? Exactly. The moon is still doing her job. Hallelujah. So now it says, and the sinner against the godly. Love your family, love your wife or your husband or your boss that's not dealing with Yahweh. They are set against you, what the Most High is saying. They set against you. So now let's go on to verse 15. So look upon all the works of the Most High. Look on all of the works of the Most High. And there are 2 and 2, one against another. You see that? Everything he made has its balance. There's no balance with a crescent moon. Only balance with a crescent moon is the waxing crescent and the waning crescent. Okay, waxing crescent is at the beginning of the month, and the waning crescent is at the end of the month. And what do you have in between that? You got a kasa, which the Bible talks about the concealing of the moon, and then you have the Laban, the white moon, which is called which is the middle of the month. Let me get into that too. We already showed you how the Kadash is concealed, not bright. But we got to look into how the words are used. So this is just showing you how the Most High made things opposite to each other. 2 against 2. It's always a polarity, good and evil. So the white moon we know is a beautiful sight. It's perfectly full and round. What's the opposite of that? A perfectly round and absent of visual of naked vision black moon. That's the opposite. The Most High said everything's set up opposite. So we don't even got to debate no more about it. What is the opposite? That means that if you're beginning the month on a waxing, remember opposites across from each other, not right back where you started from. If you're beginning the month at the beginning with a waxing crescent, then your midpoint should be a waning gibbous, and your end point, you understand? Your end point should be a waxing a wane or a waning crescent. We can even give you a waning crescent. Okay, but between a waxing crescent when the crescent's getting bigger and a waning crescent when the crescent's getting smaller, okay, you have a whole month. Okay, you have a whole month. So when it's waxing great, the month is just starting. And then when it's getting small again, it's ending. So why don't you end it on a waning crescent if you started on a waxing crescent? Because you don't know what's happening in between. So when's the end of the month? Is there a slither at the end of the month too? And a slither at the beginning of the month? What is the black month? What is the black moon? See, the black moon would have to be, you count that toward the end of the month. But it's blackness. It's the opposite of the white moon. What's the polarity or what's the opposite that the Most High created against that? You see, the Most High said he created things 2 by 2s, man. Now in Ecclesiasticus chapter 42, verse 24, it says what? All things are double, one against another. See that? Most High's word is perfect. He made everything in doubles, but opposites. All things are double, one against another. So the full moon, white, new moon, black. Okay. Full moon, the magnetics of the earth and the moon are pulling. New moon, everything's calm, more calm. See that? He said all things are double, one against another, and he has made nothing imperfect. So now for you to come and say, oh, the moon is imperfect, it's going to lose 10 days, we got to use the sun now. The Most High say he made the moon perfect. All right, verse 25. One thing establishes the good of another. So you see the purpose of one thing by comparing it to the function of another thing, and that's what makes you see it has a purpose. The good of this thing, I didn't understand it, but now this thing over here, when I contrast it to this, now I see it has its purpose. Okay. And who shall be filled with beholding his glory? Now it's going to move right into the constellations and the heavens, the firmament. Look at what it says. Ecclesiastes 43:1. The pride of the height, the clear firmament, the beauty of heaven with his glorious show. The sun when it arises, declaring in his rising a marvelous instrument, the work of the Most High. At noon it parcheth the country, and who can abide the burning thereof? A man blowing a furnace is the work of heat, but the sun burneth mountains 3 times more, breathing out fiery vapors and sending forth bright beams that dimmeth the light. Great is Yahweh that made it, and at his command it runneth hastily. So now it said it said the sun is running hastily. It don't see Greek mythology, Helios was pulled on a chariot. Not running. But the Bible said that the sun is running, okay, hastily. But the book Enoch says it's a chariot that's pulling the sun. The Bible said the sun is doing his own job on its own. That's what it says. Okay? It says so you got to be careful. All right? These other books trying to match them up with the Bible. The Bible say this is perfect, man. We can go over any doctrine from right here and prove it right that we teach it from this book. You go into some other book, you ain't going to be digging into this book trying to figure out what's what, because you're going to figure out, oh, I got it now. The book of Enoch got the truth, so I'm going to use that one. Okay? Now, what does it say? It says that the moon is a sign of, it says he made the moon also to serve in her season. Remember that word season is what? Mawa'id. So the moon has its season, its feast, and its festivals at the beginning of every month is a holy day. And the moon serves us, and it's told them, hey, relax and chill out. I got you. It's a day off of work. Okay? He made the moon also to serve in her season for a declaration of times and a sign of the world. You see, the moon is working with the constellations in Genesis chapter 1, verse 14, for signs, seasons, days, and years. But right here it just says times in general and a sign for the world. So the moon is made as a sign for the world, and the constellation is a sign for the moon. Whatever the constellation that the moon is in, that shows you what month it is. And wherever the moon is at, that shows what month we're in, and it shows you the day of those months that we're supposed to keep holy for the first month, and then for the seventh month also. Okay, and then it says what? It says, from the moon is a sign of feasts. Remember that word feast? We have two words, mawa'idya, and then we have chag. So the moon is mainly a sign for the chag, but it works with the constellations to be a sign for the mawa'idya. All right, for the appointed times. All right, for those things that move and then get planted in. But remember, this moon is always moving. It's always moving. So the sign of the feast, sign of the world, is dealing with how the moon is used to show us the months. Okay, a sign of the world, the athaf is planted, it's hooked in, and it's powerful. All right, athaf is how you say sign. But remember, the constellations are also used for signs. Okay, so now from the moon is a sign of feast. Now listen what it says: a light that decreases in her perfection. So now that when the moon is at its perfect state, like we read in Psalms 81 and 3, it's kasa'ah in the Kadash. When the moon is at its perfect state, it's kasa'ah. And when it's at that perfect state, that's when we begin to count from one again. We don't wait until it's moved from the perfect state, and then it's got 2 or 3 days blackness, and then we got a little crescent, and now we're going to start to count it. That's not how we do things in the scriptures. We read already how the new moon is covered, is concealed, and now we're reading where it says the new moon has a sign of the feast. Okay, I thought we were supposed to go to Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 13. We saw how David said that the new moon was covered, and we saw how Moses, the Most High, showed Moses when he wrote Genesis, and Ezra when he wrote Genesis, about how the moon is for signs, seasons, days, and years, for those 4 things. All right. So now, when we go back into Ecclesiastes chapter 43, it says, from the moon is a sign of feast. Okay. Mainly they're talking about the feast of Passover, then the feast of Really, the Feast of Passover, and then the Memorial of Blowing the Trumpet, Day of Atonement, and the Feast of Chag HaSukkot, the Feast of Booths. Okay, so it says from the moon is the sign of feast, a light that decreases in her perfection. So in her perfection, the light is decreased. So how can you say the white moon is the new moon when it's full of light? That's not in its perfect state. In its perfect state, the scripture says that the moon has no light. It says, Ecclesiasticus chapter 43, all right, verse 7. From the moon is the sign of feast, a light which decreaseth in her perfection. Okay. Verse 8. The month is called after her name. The new month, Kadash, means new, also means new moon. The fifth Kadash, the sixth Kadash. Every time it says the fifth month or the sixth month in the Hebrew, it says Kadash. The month is called after, meaning the completion of the purpose that she was created for. In front of the sun, and that's when you have the new month. Okay. Ecclesiasticus 43:9. The beauty of heaven, the glory of the stars, an ornament giving light in the highest places of Yahweh. Listen what it say now, because the book of Enoch says that the moon is going to lose strength, lose force, and it's going to be 10 days off. Not going to do his job no more. And people are going to be watching the moon to observe the feast, and they're going to be going off. All right? Let me show you. In Ecclesiastes chapter 43, verse 10. At the commandment of the Holy One, they will stand in their order and never fail in their watches. So the sun, the moon, the stars, the constellations, they are never going to stop doing their job properly. So you have a doctrine being taught that says that we got to use this book, and this book tells you that the moon is going to stop doing her job. That book is garbage, man. It's contradicting the Bible, straight up and down. Your feelings might not like what I'm saying, but it's contradicting the Bible. The Bible says that the moon is going to do her job, and it's going to be constant in its job. It's never going to fail. It's going to stand in its order, and it won't faint in their watches. That's what the Bible says. That's what Ecclesiasticus said in the book that we're reading from. So when you got somebody else saying that, no, we got to use the sun, the equinox for the new year, that's not right. That's because they don't know about that Genesis 1:14 on how to use how to really calculate your years. And Josephus told you about it. Josephus said that we begin the year when the sun appears in Aries, the constellation Aries. Now we know when you talk about the sun, he's going into the sun. When you study, the sun goes into the constellation first because it moves slow. The sun moves very slow, but the sun moves very slow. Yeah, the moon moves fast. So the sun goes into the constellation first, and then the moon comes in and they line up. And once they line up, that's when we have a new month. That's when we have. That's when they line up. You see, so this is all biblical. Okay, I didn't go outside the Bible yet. I didn't go to no book of Enoch, no book of Jubilee. I didn't get to no book of the lost book of Judas Iscariot. I ain't go nowhere yet. I'm still inside the Bible. It's enough in here. I don't got to go nowhere else. It's enough in this book right here where we don't got to go into the whole bunch of extraordinary, secret, just not revealed. I guess everybody before now was just a dumbass, right? All the Israelites from the 1700s, the 1800s, all right, the 400s, they was all just a bunch of dumbasses without these extra books, right? They was just all stupid idolaters worshiping false gods. and we got it right now. I mean, how vain and self-absorbed can you be? You think it's coincidence that the time that we get into the hands of our enemy is the time that our enemies start producing these books? We got copies of the Bible and the prophets in other territories that we were captive at outside of America. You see, the Bible is the book that has all of the secrets that we need to know to come up with our proper conclusion, especially within the law. Okay, especially within. Well, I guess I could have done from there. Especially within the law. You understand? Okay, the water. Okay, so now, excuse me. There's you know, the perfecting of the laws of the Most High inside of His Word that we standing on. All right, that we standing on now. So we got to read His Word. Now, I'm not saying that we got to do traditions of men because it's been around for a long time. What I'm saying is that when we dig into His Word and when we look into the Word and we read the Word, the answer is going to be in His Word. We should need to think that we need no other mate, hint, hint, for the Bible. None of these words shall want their mate. Okay? None shall want her mate. So now when it goes into one last understanding, we're going to try to go to the book of Solomon, chapter 13. With Solomon, he's going to go into the constellations. Okay? Solomon chapter Wisdom of Solomon chapter 13, verse 1 and 2 and 3. Surely vain are all men by nature, who are ignorant of Yahweh, where the moon and sun are at, and what month it is that we're in. And it's the same every year. Every time when the sheep or the lamb or the sheep and the bull is in the first and second month every year. Okay, every year. So it talks about the circle of stars, and then it talks about the lights of heaven. What's the lights of heaven? Those are the other stars that's not part of that circle. That's the moon and that's the sun. You see? Those are all the lights that we see in Genesis chapter 1, verse 14 and verse 15. So the only reason we're going long and long is because when you're dealing with this subject, you got to try to cover every angle where somebody might not understand what you're saying, and they might have a question. So I got to try to answer that question for you because you're not sitting in front of me. Okay? So I got to try to figure, okay, what is it that's not a proper understanding, and what do I need to show you to give a proper understanding to you? So here we see in Wisdom of Solomon 13 and 2 that the circle of stars and the lights of heaven are grouped together. Same thing we see in Genesis chapter 1, verse 14 and 15. We see a group of lights grouped by themselves, and then we see the sun, moon, and stars grouped by themselves also. Okay, except in Wisdom of Solomon 3 and 2, we see it calls it a circle of stars. Okay, and these are for signs, seasons, days, and years. And we know everything is happening in a cycle, in a circle, in the universe. All right, things move in a circular type of fashion. So they end up where they start off at, and they start off where they end up at. Okay. The new moon, it always begins with the sun, but the sun keeps moving. It begins when it gets in front of the sun. So I think that's about it. Of course, there's other verses we could go to, but not now. You know, maybe I can pick it up at a later time. Let's see. Okay, so today. One last one. I'm gonna end on this one. Okay. Um, Psalms 104, verse 19. Okay. Psalms 104, verse 19 says this: He appointed the moon for seasons. The sun knoweth his going down. Thou makest darkness, and it is night, wherein all the beasts of the forest do creep forth. The young lions roar after their prey and seek their meat from Elohim. The sun arises, they gather themselves together and lay them down in their dens. Man goes forth unto his labor, and to his labor, man goeth forth unto his work, and to his labor until the evening. See that? So it says he works until the evening. At the evening, what happens? He stops working. He rests, showing you when the Sabbath starts. That's plain as day right there. And then also the sun arises, that the rest of the world is still going on. Got lions and hunting and stuff at night. But let's jump up to 19 again. The moon he appointed for seasons. Okay. In other words, seasons most likely is going to be Mawa idea. Okay. So he made the moon for seasons. Okay. So if the moon is for seasons, how can we be waiting for the sun to go into for the winter, for spring equinox? It's all about the moon, and the moon is working off of the constellations. So they're working together, regardless of what position the sun is in. Okay. He appointed the moon for seasons. The sun knoweth his going down, showing you how the moon is the one that controls when you're going to observe the Mawa Idya. And the sun, it goes down, comes up, showing you how it has a more consistent pattern. Okay, so he already knows when we'll be at this time of the year. The sun just rise and fall, rise and fall, rise and fall. The moon moves and it changes speeds. Okay, changes speeds. So this is a very beautiful chapter when you read it. Psalms 104. Very beautiful chapter. You got to really read that chapter right there. Like, it's dope. I had some more verses in here, but man, I wrote this thing so long ago, the ink turned yellow. Something 613 with an E. Oh, that's talking about the moon and stuff. I think that's second Ezra's. I think that's second Ezra 613. Oh, I said that Psalms 104 was the last one, didn't I? 6:13. Yeah, I don't know what that is. Ain't nothing. Maybe it's first Ezra 6:13. I doubt that though. Ain't nothing back there pertaining to the sun and the moon. Anyway, y'all. I hope that you get a little more understanding. This was once again. This is compact. Yeah, I think it's 6:43. I wrote it over again up here, so let me scratch it out so I don't be trying to figure out what it is next time around. Okay. Check out Job chapter 38 though, and go to verse 31 when it talks about Mazarah. And one of them, man, they knew. See, this when they did this book, a lot of times the people knew what these things were talking about. So if you look up Mazzaroth right now, it'll tell you that it's talking about the 12 constellations. Now, if they found some other constellations, good for them. I'm going with the 12 that we see that our ancestors drew pictures of and recognized and all of that. All right. So Mazzaroth says talking about the 12 signs in his season. Canst thou bring forth Mazzaroth in his season? Or canst thou guide Arcturus with his sons? Knowest thou the ordinances of heaven? Canst thou set the dominion thereof in the earth? You see that? So it says that there's ordinance in heaven, ordinances of heaven. Once again, read that Job chapter 38, verse 31 and 32. It talks about Pleiades. It talks about Orion. It talks about Mazzaroth. It talks about Arcturus. So all these things are constellations and star groups that the Most High set up there that Job and them knew about and how they relate to everything. Now you know that the seasons are related to Job chapter 38, verse 2. Why? Because it uses the word seasons. Okay. And then when we talk about Arcturus guiding his sons, right? That's probably going into that guiding his sons. Look what it's saying. That's probably going into guidance of sons, which would be, when the Most High guided us out of Egypt, and when He guided us during the Feast of Tabernacles in the wilderness, He was guiding us constantly. So this probably links up to the first month and the seventh month of the Hebrew year. Okay, so what I wanted to do was I wanted to go into real quick, and once again, man, like, I'm not teaching doctrine. See, that's the way I'm bringing out the Most High, Yahushua, the way He showed me how to talk about scriptures is just, to read what His words say and know what it's talking about. And if it goes into the science, explain the science of it. If it goes into the history, explain the history. If it goes into the knowledge, the language, explain the language of it. But we have to explain the scripture, what it's talking about. It's not a book of doctrine. It's a book of history. And the doctrine of this book is clear. This is a book of doctrine pure, not doctrine of disagreements. So if we got a disagreement over the doctrine, we got to dig into this book and read about it. Okay? It said by Ifwa. certainty, evening, eventide, noon. It says Ba Ith. So can you bring forth Mazaroth by Ithwa in season? We'll use the word Ith, which is going to be Ith, and then the last one of the last entries because it has a Thawa on it. By Ith. So it says Ith. It says Ith is a word that uses evening or time. It's used a lot for evening also. Okay. So these things come forth, in the evening, which kind of links up to how the constellation were used to divide the night and the day. Okay. Used to divide the night and day with evening. The three stages of evening, the first two stages kind of being that buffer. And then the last stage going into like the night, which is going to be the end of one day and the beginning of another day. It says Arcturus, Isle. It says Wa Ayash. Okay. It's called the thing Iyash. Wa Iyash Isle Banyaha. Okay. You got it. Can you bind the sweet influences? The influence of Pleiades, which is Kayama. Okay. Or the bands of Orion, Cassial. Okay. Can you loose them? Loose the bands of Orion. You see, that's Bible goes all different types of stuff, man. And these constellations that you read about in Job chapter 38, verse 31 and 32, they link up with the year. They link up with the month. They link up perfectly with Genesis chapter 1, verse 14. So you need to be looking there to see the pattern and the consistency of the new year, not in these extra other books. Now, I'm going to show you something also that we didn't use the moon. We didn't use the moon when we seen the crescent. We knew beforehand when the new moon was coming in. Okay? And Bashem Yahweh Shai HaMashiach, I'm going to show it to you. Okay? Let's go to Judith chapter in Judith. Okay. Let's go let me go to Judith, y'all. Talks about Judith was so fly. Beautiful daughter of Zion. Okay. It tells you that when Judith was around, that she fasted. She was like up on her roof. She wasn't doing a whole lot of eating and drinking. But then when the time came for the new moon, she would stop fasting. Not only on the new moon she would eat, but it also said that she stopped fasting on the evening before the new moon. Okay, and that's kind of this is in this is in Judith chapter 8, and it goes into verse. I'm going to right to verse 6. It says, "And she fasted all the days of her widowhood; her husband died, save, meaning except, the eves of the Sabbath." So she knew when the Sabbath was coming in, and she wouldn't fast at evening of the Sabbath and on the Sabbath. So when the Sabbath actually came in, she didn't fast. Okay? And the eves of the new moons and the new moons. So on the evenings of the new moon, she would eat. On the actual new moon, she would eat. She would stop fasting. So this shows you that she knew when the evening was coming. Meaning she knew when the day before the new moon started. She didn't wait for a visual sighting of a crescent. You got to stop doing that, man. That crescent moon goes into a high level of demon worship, idolatry, present in East India, present in ancient Egypt, present in Babylon, Assyria, Sumeria, all right, Rome, Greece, goes into Yoruba religion. That worshiping and observing the crescent moon is actually worshiping what they call the Queen of Heaven, that goes under many different names. And we're going to go over a lesson on that pretty soon about the evils of the crescent moon. Because the moon was created to do a job, but what they did, people feminized the moon and they worshiped it, for fertility and things of that nature. And then you have Enlil and ancient Phoenician gods that people worshiped through worshiping the new moon also. All right. But the point I was making was that is that she knew when the new moon was coming in. She didn't wait for somebody to say they saw the crescent. And then said, oh, it's the new moon now. Now the day has already passed. The new moon, like we saw in Psalms chapter 81, verse 2, that the new moon is black. And then we went over into the book of Proverbs chapter 7 to show that it's a new moon also that's black. Then we went to Ecclesiastes chapter 23 to show that the moon decreases her light, like it says in Psalms 81 and 3. They all work together to show you that the moon was black, not a crescent. Wasn't white on the right-hand side. That's a lie. We didn't do that. You got to stop doing it. Drop your pride. This is new age stuff that the children of Israel did not observe. Okay? Children of Israel did not observe these things. We ain't supposed to do those things. The black moon is the moon that is a holy day of rest. Sabbath comes every 7 days, independent of what's going on with the calendar of the moon. Okay? Stop following the Sabbath according to the moon. That's Babylonian also. And I'm going to bring that out also. And stop following the crescent moon. That's idolatry from every nation. And it's evil. It's wicked. And you're conjuring up ancient demons. And you're polluting the Most High's holy days. And he's getting further and further away from you. And that's why we spend so much time in strife and in arguments and debating. Because we're doing things off and we're not dealing with the Holy Spirit of the Most High. And we got to stop sinning. And in order to stop sinning, we need to know one of the things we got to know his laws and commandments and statutes, and we got to know what are the days we're supposed to keep it holy. And stop being subject to sin. So in Judith, it showed you that she was observing the evening before the new moon and also observing the new moon. So how would she know? Only way she would know when the evening of the new moon was going to be was to have a calendar. We had calendars. We had calendars. You think people, we had calendars that shows you what day was going to be when and all these sorts of things, man. Remember, you had people that were living for 900 something years, man. You think we just waited for 900 years? People were living. Nobody was intelligent enough. For 900 years, people were living, and they knew they had knowledge. They observed nature. They observed patterns on things, and that's how they was able to write books about what herbs did what metals could do what animals were good for doing certain things. They were masters at everything because they were living for so long, and they passed this knowledge down to us, and we have it. A lot of it's in our spirit that links up when we read the Bible. And a lot of it's just passed down to us through the cultures that we may have come from. So going back to Judith chapter 8, verse 5 and 6. And she fasted all the days of her widowhood, save the eves of the Sabbath. Save means except for. The eves of the Sabbath, and the eves of the new moons, and the feasts and solemn days of the house of Yasharallah. So it says she stopped fasting on the new moon and the evening before the new moon, and on the Sabbath and the evening before the Sabbath. So she, was eating on these regular feast days. See that? I mean, this is something that we have to take note of because it's showing you that she was part of a system that knew in advance when these days were going to be coming, when these days were going to be observed. And notice I'm not using a whole bunch of, well, if so-and-so, then what about this? Or if this, then how could so-and-so? No, I'm using exactly what it says. Now I'm going to the last one I hope to go into. I know I said that about two chapters ago. I want to go into Samuel. Okay, this is 1 Samuel 1 Samuel chapter 20. We're going to read verse 5. How between the time of David and the time of Judith, let's see. Going to Judith. About 500-year difference between Judith and Malak Dawad. Now let's read 1 Samuel 20:5. It says, and David said unto Jonathan, Dawad said unto Jonathan, behold, tomorrow is the new moon. Tomorrow is the Kadash. And I should not fail to sit with the king at meat. But let me go, that I may hide myself in the field until the third day at evening. So we see that David knew in advance when the new moon was coming. So he was keeping track. He was keeping count. He knew the calendar. So he knew, oh, tomorrow is the new moon. So tomorrow is going to be the new moon, man. Okay. The next day is going to be the new moon. So how is David knowing in advance when the new moon is going to be? Not because it's the big white moon in the sky. That's not the answer. But because we had a calendar system. And if there's a big white moon in the sky, it's white and full for 2, 3, 4 days. But that ain't what it's talking about. Okay? How you going to hide in the field under a new moon? I've been under a full moon. Me and Kadal Tazayah were over in Kansas City. And man, the moon was so bright, it was making a shadow on us. But the shadow couldn't be picked up with a camera. That's how dark the shadow was. But the moon was casting a shadow from our bodies. The moon was to our back, and this moonbeam was shining down, making a shadow in front of us, of ourselves. You can't hide no field for 3 days at no white moon. You can in the black moon. But the point I'm making is that at the new moon, which is the black moon, not the crescent moon, David knew in advance, Malak Dawad, King David knew in advance, tomorrow is the new moon. That's all I want to point out right there. That he knew that tomorrow was going to be the new moon. Okay? And now when we go into 1 Samuel chapter 20, verse 18, it says, then Jonathan said unto Dawad, tomorrow is the new moon, and thou shalt be missed, because thy seat will be empty. So they got together on the new moon, had like a nice little feast at the king's house. And Jonathan said, yo, tomorrow's a new moon, man. We're going to miss you. So he knew that it was a new moon also. Okay. So it says, verse 24. So Dawad hid himself in the field. And when the new moon was come, the king sat him down to eat. So the king sat down and eat at the new moon. And while Dawad was hiding in the field. Okay, just showing you how they were getting together on the new moon, and they knew in advance when the new moon was going to be coming in, when it was going to be, happening. So that's just showing you how they weren't observing no crescents. It wasn't a primitive, we got to see it with our own eyes. Okay? The new moon is the new moon, whether you see it or not. It don't work. It works on its own clock, its own schedule, and it's not going to stop doing its job because you don't see it. So you can't begin it or end it based on what you see. You got to begin it or end it based on the cycle and the pattern of nature that the Most High created it to be in from the beginning. All right, so that's about enough about the Kadash. I can't think of anything else right now that I want to go into. We can go into a little bit more later on. I'm using the Bible. And earlier we were using the Chumash, the Kawamash. Now it's long, and I appreciate y'all, tuning in and listening and everything. Thank you for your support. And we're going to try to get some better equipment so we can have some stuff up on the screen for you to see, and the Bible right there. And then, you know me, I like to go back and forth between the Spanish and the English, or the Spanish and the Hebrew, maybe the English and the Hebrew also, or like a split screen. You see? So we want to really show you what the Bible is saying, so you won't be led astray and be fooled when somebody comes with a new doctrine. When you yourself start thinking of a new doctrine, you have to have the foundation to work off of, to say, well, I can't go that way. Teachers didn't teach me that. You can't forget your teachers, man. Right? A lot of you brothers and sisters out there, man, you know, I gave you a lot of you know, a lot of basics. Okay. And the basics that I gave you, you know, are strong basics. And because I'm not on YouTube or on Facebook teaching you every single day, that doesn't mean that you forsake what your teachers taught you. All right. This is Proverbs 5:13. It says, nor incline mine ear to them that instructed me. So if I've instructed you and started teaching you, you got to incline your ear and worship him in spirit and in truth, and to walk in his word. To walk what we know in the Torah is the only way we're going to gain a better understanding of the Tawrat. All right? So, you know, I love you all. In the name of Yahweh, Bashem HaMashiach Yahweh Shai, Yabalakakam Yahweh, or Yashamar come. Yabalakakam Yahweh, or Yashamar come, Bashem HaMashiach Yahweh Shai. All right? Shalom Lakam.